situation. But just thought I'd bring that out there. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Well, what do you think, Mark? The fix is in the NHL, man? I was going to ask you about that. They're trying to put it to your Blues here?
No, actually, I thought the last game was actually called pretty good. It was, if you look at it, St. Louis had the most power play opportunities. They just couldn't score. So it wasn't that the NHL was totally trying to give Boston the win or anything.
Yeah, I haven't watched any hockey, so I couldn't tell you, but I know that there's been some complaining online over both the NBA and the NHL over the playoffs.
Yeah, the refereeing is horrible in both of them, in my opinion. But it was that egregious slew foot. I couldn't believe it. And I hate Boston. Despise them. I want St. Louis to win. But the referee was looking right at the guy when he slew footed him and then allowed the play to go into a goal. And it made no sense.
Huh. All right. And then, Chris, you been following the NBA at all?
I mean, I've been following it. I can't say that I've watched a ton of it. Like I said, I think last week we talked about I was just on the wrong guys, or maybe we didn't, but maybe we talked about that privately. It should be interesting. I'm curious to see how this Game 6 plays out. I certainly thought with Kevin Durant coming back, it kind of would have solidified a championship, and maybe would have been that first championship in Stu Gotz's book. For Kevin Durant, if he was able to lead them back down 3-1 to win the series. But, we've seen ad nauseum, and it's been discussed ad nauseum whether he should or shouldn't have played the video of his Achilles rupturing. And it's just, it is what it is. It's the championship, and you do what you do. It's not like it was a regular season game, and it's not like this guy was, risking the rest of his life or anything like that. They're paid very well, and if he never plays another game of basketball, I have a feeling that he's going to be okay financially.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So what kind of big changes do you think that makes to the free agency of the NBA? I mean, is this put a, bigger spotlight on some other players, obviously?
Well, it does open up. Will he option into his last year? Because he's not, I can't imagine him playing, until I'd want to say January or February, maybe even March. So if he goes to, or if his plan was to go to a team like New York or any of these other places, it doesn't make as much sense. He can option in, take his time, have another run with the Warriors. I think he genuinely likes playing there. I think that there are certain things that have pushed him to maybe want to leave. But what'll be interesting is that when he does go elsewhere, because I believe that he probably will, whether it's this year or next year, does he want to go someplace where he's going to be the number one guy? Will he be able to? I think his type of game is all right enough that he won't be as explosive with rehabbing this Achilles, but I think his type of game will be okay. But at that point, does he want to go somewhere? Maybe, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there, like to LA with LeBron, if there's another guy where those guys can be number 2, number 3, and maybe a guy like Anthony Davis can be the number 1. It depends. I think the one thing that the NBA does better than anybody is 100% their offseason, the acquisitions, the free agent moves. And I mean, the biggest reason for that is the impact and the scarcity in comparison on rosters. You got 20-some guys on a Major League Baseball team, similar numbers on a hockey team. One guy's not going to have that same impact that somebody will in the NBA because they're a little bit.
One superstar to a new team changes the landscape.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I saw was if Kemba Walker doesn't re-sign in Charlotte, some of the teams that might be interested, like an LA, and that would be an interesting pickup. Kemba with LeBron, and you'd have to venture to guess that that's probably because they've moved on from Lonzo, where he was part of a deal with New Orleans. So it should be interesting. It always is. Come July 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, that whole free agency time.
Yeah, I always look forward to it. I don't watch a lot of basketball, but I do enjoy reading the highlights, watching some of the stuff, and listening to the offseason. It's always packed with some kind of action.
Yeah, that and the trade deadline, I think they do very well. I think Major League Baseball does pretty decently when it comes to the trade deadline, but it's not, it's not exciting on both sides sometimes because you're getting a lot of these picks and these guys that you might not see for 2 or 3 years, and by the time they come up, you forgot the entire transaction that they were a part of. Or they don't play out. A guy like Candelario still has an opportunity to, but he was a centerpiece in one of those Tigers rebuilding trades, and he is not going to be, a centerpiece guy, or even a guy like Castellanos, who has, was a prospect at one time and is really capped out in what he is and what he will be, to the point where, he's going to go somewhere else. But I think basketball just does a little bit better, a little more exciting.
I would tend to agree. So let's talk about baseball real quick, because I haven't played since I left for Vegas. And so I want to get in this 3-game night slate. 8:10 start time. We got Seattle at Minnesota, Milwaukee at Houston, Detroit at Kansas City. And I'm going to slap a $10 entry in. So you want to help me break this down?
Sure.
All right. Well, let's start with Seattle at Minnesota. We have got Bautista versus Berrios. Is Bautista a opener? Is that what that's going to be?
Yeah, it's going to be Tommy Malone following him up. I mean, I think that this is, Berrios is a little bit better at home. That Minnesota offense is extremely lethal, so I don't have a problem, targeting anybody up and down that lineup. I like every single one of them. I couldn't tell you to go one guy over the other. I think Berrios is certainly a playable guy, especially in this 3-game slate. Not sure that I really want to get anybody on the Seattle. They've really cooled off. They've really regressed. And, that flash that they had at the beginning of the year was very reminiscent of the Angels last year. If you remember, that offense got off to a huge start with Ohtani and just kind of fizzled out right around this time last year. And Seattle's kind of done the same thing. They're still pretty dangerous from time to time, but they're not the juggernaut that they were at the beginning of the year.
So, I mean, with this only 6 pitchers here to choose from, I mean, Berrios is kind of a lock, or do you just go ahead and try to take a contrarian play? So this is a 1,400-person tournament, 42 multi-entries allowed, 2.5K to first place. So got to get a little contrarian, at least, right?
I mean, I think the lock is Verlander. I mean, you look at what he's done. It's a tough matchup, and you might give up a home run or two, but the guy has consistently produced at this value. And what's happened, if you notice in the pricing, and it might be a little bit harder because there's 3 games, but DraftKings has significantly loosened up their pricing. You have guys that are in the low 3s, mid 3s, whereas earlier in the year, everybody was like 4K or higher. So it was really difficult to go up and pay for the pitching, especially because that high-end pitching was not producing. But go ahead, you can take a look at Verlander's game logs, you can take a look at his salary, and you can feel pretty good about, locking him in. I think that's the way to go. If you wanted to pair him with Berrios, that's fine. You're just going to have to kind of figure out, who you're going to put in that lineup. But you're going to have to probably roster guys like Tony Kemp and Tyler White. And
I'll tell you, looking through the pricing right now, Chris, the best values on the board is the Houston bats. 100%.
Yeah, but I mean, Woodruff's a good pitcher too. That's the other thing. And so you're getting a Houston team that doesn't have Springer, that doesn't have Altuve, that doesn't have Correa. It doesn't have the ability to flip it over. But yes, you are getting, a discount Brantley, a discount Bregman. Marcinick has been good. I don't think he's in the lineup tonight. I could be wrong.
Gurriel's hitting cleanup at 3,400.
Yeah, and Gurriel is not typically a guy that I target. And, I regretted it last night because he had one of those games, but I don't think he does again, not tonight. I mean, you can look at this guy and he's just not a dude that puts up those type of numbers on a regular basis. He'll pop off here and there, so you can take your stab at it. But I think you'd be point chasing in this case.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you got Brantley hitting third at 4,300, which isn't bad. You've got Bregman under 5,000, which is always a treat. Kemp at 35, Tyler White at 26. Marisnik is in the lineup and batting ninth at 38.
Yeah, so you can see, I mean, these prices have drastically changed from what they were earlier in the year.
Or you can, stack up some Tigers or Royals.
Well, the problem with the Royals is, Mondesi is the guy that you kind of want to target there, and he's not cheap. He's 5,400, 56. I don't think that, the Cuthbert's not playing, if I'm not mistaken. You got O'Hearn there, who's pretty cheap. Dozier's still on the DL. Gordon hasn't been hitting as good. Witt's kind of going through a cold streak, but they are playing Daniel Norris. I will tell you that I had this feeling at one point today where I was just like, you know what? I need to get some Royals. So I feel like the Royals are going to go off, but I've had that feeling before and I've been very wrong. So take that for what it's worth.
Oh, for sure. But, I mean, you get a guy like their catcher punt at 2,700 with Maldonado and O'Hearn with 3,100. You can get a little mini stack there, and you might be able to end up paying up for Mondesi if you get enough value out there. What about any of these Tigers against Danny Duffy? The Tigers do much better against left-handed pitchers.
Sure. I don't know. I think Duffy's had one of the harder schedules to start the year in terms of teams that he's faced and the ISOs and strikeout matchups. So, he's done pretty well given all of those type of things. I think his start to his season is not that unlike Verlander, who I think is the only person that's had a harder schedule than Duffy. So when you take that into account and you look at what Duffy's been able to do, I think Duffy is a guy that you can definitely target as your SB2 if you're not going to go Berrios. I think that there really are three clear-cut options here in the games. It's going to be Verlander, and then do you want to pair him with Berrios? Do you want to pair him with Duffy? And, if the Tigers end up beating you, I mean, I think you should be okay with that because it's not going to happen more often than not. So, yeah, that's the way that I look at that.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
I don't think that Duffy's going to be the second highest owned pitcher either. He may be. I can see Woodruff garnering more ownership, and I can see Berrios garnering more ownership. So you're going to get the fourth highest owned pitcher. The only two other guys would be like Malone or the opener or Daniel Norris, neither of which I have any, neither have any interest for, unless you're going to go with the opener and then stack the bottom half of the Twins lineup. I think that's something that you can do. Hope that you get 5-6 points. He gets through the first three guys. You move on. Malone comes in. Malone blows up, and it's the second half of the lineup that kind of lights him up and gets the maximum amount of bats against the guys that you're targeting.
So who's your guy here in Minnesota? Where do you start?
If my favorite guy that I would lock in would probably be Nelson Cruz. He's just been on fire recently, so I like Cruz. I like Cron. Kepler is another guy. Sano. Those are probably. And then you got to go Mitch Garver. So if you have the money, I mean that's been an interesting spot for the Twins when you think about the catcher position and just the power that they've been flexing with Mitch Garver and Jason Castro. It's just outrageous what those two guys have been doing.
Yeah, outstanding. I'm trying to see what I can fit in here. Playing around a little bit here. It's tough. It's tough to get anybody in here, to be honest. It's real tough. Unless you take a shot on Travis Shaw with a one-off against Verlander and Maldonado. It's an interesting lineup here. I got Verlander and Duffy, Maldonado, O'Hearn, Kemp, and then Shaw, Polanco, Kepler, Cruz, Rosario. Fit those guys in there. It's an interesting lineup.
Yeah.
but you're
it's just you
basically
have to think like
punting
how many
three
people
spots.
are going to do that. Yeah, exactly. I mean,